Morning, everybody. Everyone aware?
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank you, Lord, for Laura. Thank you that she's an amazing woman of God, mother and a wife, and much, much more. And we just thank you for the gift of teaching that she's got in her life. And we just pray that you'll use it today to speak to all of us about you. In your name. Amen.
Amen. Just whipped out during the worship and put Barney down for a nap. So I'm simultaneously preaching and watching him not sleeping on the video monitor. So there we go. Multitasking. Ah, nice to see all your faces this morning. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, thumbs up, thumbs up. Nice to see you all in Liberty House. So we are in August, in case you weren't aware what month it was. I have not got a clue what day it is. Sunday, I think, is the only day of the week when I'm like, oh yeah, it's definitely Sunday today. Apart from that, I'm like, nope, don't know, no idea what day it is. But yeah, we're in August and we're carrying on with our summer series, which has basically just been a chance for us all to take turns just sharing our hearts really, and bring in something that feels kind of fresh and relevant and something that God is doing or saying that we want to share. So that's where we're headed this morning. Just got some thoughts that I wanted to share, and it's just all out of some things that God has been doing with me and things that he's been sort of showing, teaching me over the last few months. Yeah, and I'm excited. I feel like there could be some real just release of kind of joy and peace for people this morning. So so kind of, yeah, zone in and get ready to really have your heart open to what the Holy Spirit might have for you personally. Quick barn check. Okay, it looks like he might be sleeping. This is good. Right, so yeah, this kind of whole thing that God was showing me came out of a little encounter that I had with him. So towards the end of kind of full-on lockdown, we were planning to go and visit my parents. My dad's on Zoom today. Hi, Dad. And we're really excited to go see them because obviously, same as all you guys, we hadn't been able to see them and the kids hadn't seen their grandparents for ages. So we're planning this trip, and then class week and a half before we were due to go. And there wasn't time to get it fixed. So we were like, oh, how are we going to get there? What are we going to do? God, provide a way. And Tim and Jane Groves, who are absolute legends, I don't think they're here this morning, but oh, they're so amazing. They offered to lend us their car so that we could go and see my parents, which was such a blessing. And so, yeah, so that was kind of set and that was going to happen. But then as we were kind of texting and working out insurance and stuff, it was basically going to cost about £125 to put just me on the insurance for a week and a half. And like, it was fine, you know, we did have that money. But I just woke up one morning just feeling, I don't know, just really stressed about it and a bit anxious and a bit annoyed, frustrated with our car that it was just going to cost so much more, and just sort of felt myself getting really I was like, right, God, let's have a chat about this, because this isn't good. I don't know why I'm feeling so stressed about this, and I just need you to talk to me about it. And so we actually had our tent pitched in the garden at the time. So I went out to the tent, zipped myself in. I was like, right, nobody can get at me. I'm going to have this out with Jesus. And just to fill you in on what happened the day before, because it's relevant. So the day before, Josh's mum had done a massive and I basically just sent her like a picture on WhatsApp of our food shopping list, and I did a little footnote at the end saying, oh, by the way, Mary, we're not really a low-fat household. because I was worried she was going to come back with all these like rubbishy low fat options and things. I was like, we're not into that. So just so you know, when we're not a low fat household, don't bother with that. Anyway, fast forward again to my time in the tent with God the next morning. And I really clearly heard God say to me in that moment, Laura, I am not a low fat God. And it was so cool. It was such a cool moment. For a start, it just felt quite comedy, so it just made me laugh, and it just felt really personal. Like, of course, we know that God knows what we're doing and is with us in every moment. But it's just so nice when He's like, "Yeah, I was there. I know about God." So it kind of, how I was feeling already started to kind of started to change. And then I picked up my Bible and I was reading through Psalms at the time, and the psalm that I was kind of up to was Psalm 36. And I started reading through and I read these verses. Nick, if you can just pop them on the screen so we can have a look at them. So it was particularly verses 7 and 8 in Psalm 36, and it said this. It said, this is from, I think, just NIV. It says, how priceless, we got it up there, Nick? Here we go. How priceless is your unfailing love, O God. People take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the abundance of your house, and you give them drink from your river of delights. And it was just this really cool moment where God had kind of started to deal with how I was feeling, spoken to me personally. I'm not a low fat God, Laura. And then immediately I'd read this psalm that had this image of feasting in it, feasting on the abundance of God. And I just sat there and thought about that for a moment, and I was like, that's so cool, because actually that imagery of a feast, when we feast, it's not at all about, oh, what do we just need? Like, let's have some, but let's keep some back. Let's just think about, like, it's extravagant and you get all the best stuff out and you put it on the table and you know that you've got far too much and you're probably going to eat more than you should, but it's like this kind of celebration of abundance and goodness. So I was like loving it. I was having a great time in the tent, and just really feeling all this anxiety and stress just lift off me, and just really felt excited about what God was showing me. And then the absolute punchline was that I decided to read this same psalm in my Passion translation. And in that version, it had this footnote, and it said that actually that word abundance, they feast on the abundance of your house. In the original Hebrew, a better translation is fatness. So it literally should read, they feast on the fatness of your house, which is just so, well, it's so comedy, but it's so like, it's just this such a rich kind of image and what he is like, and just the absolute sort of girth of his abundance and his nature towards us. And there's going to be lots of fat references, just to warn you, but because that's where we're going. And I don't actually want this to be a talk specifically about provision, although I know that story was about provision, and I could go there, but I feel like that's a talk for another day. Just to give you the punchline to that cast miraculous turn of events, it was going to cost £125 to put just me on the insurance for a week and a half, and in the end, don't know how it happened, me and Josh were put on their insurance at the end of the year for £25. So there we go. However, this isn't going to be a story about preach about God's provision, but actually just I wanted to focus on this idea of the fatness of God in terms of just his nature, and his goodness towards us and us. And I know it sounds a little bit comedy, but just stick with me, because I feel like there's some real life-changing revelation in it, and I promise you it is totally scriptural. Literally, once I'd kind of noticed this imagery of like feasting on God, like eating God's goodness, and this idea of like this fatness, I felt like I couldn't open my Bible without it being there. Let me just give you some examples, just so you can be on board with the 34. Carly read it. It says, taste and see that the Lord is good. And the Passion Translation puts it, drink deeply of the pleasures of this God. Drink deeply of the pleasures of this God. Psalm 63 says, I will be fully satisfied as with the richest of foods. And again, that translation is fatness. I will be fully satisfied with fatness. Psalm 65 says, you crown the year. This is talking about God. You crown the carts of God overflow with abundance. And the King James Version, just like, this is just the best bit ever, actually says, thy paths drop fatness. I don't even know what that means, but I just love that image of just God being like so abundant and so fat that it's just sort of like falling off either side, because it can't be contained. Thy paths drop fatness. I just love that. And then which I want to kind of take and look at in a bit more depth, because I think that's where God's got for us to just get some real good stuff. So I'm going to read it. It's Isaiah 55 verses 1-3, and this is in the Passion Translation again. Should we pop this up on the screens, Nick? And then we can look at it together. So Isaiah 55 verses 1-3. And this is the prophet Isaiah, kind of, I guess, bringing a prophetic challenge, a prophetic message. So this is the heart of God for us. Let's have a look. There we go. So let's have a look at this. So it says, listen, are you thirsty for more? Come to the refreshing waters and drink. Even if you have no money, come buy and eat. Yes, come and buy all the wine and all the milk you desire. It won't cost a thing. Why spend your hard-earned money on something that can't nourish you, or work so hard for something that can't satisfy? So listen carefully to me, and you'll enjoy a sumptuous feast, delighting in the finest of food. Pay attention, come closer to me, and hear, that your total being may flourish. And then the Amplified Version, this is just so good, and it's that fat thing again, translates this as hearken diligently, which is just so cool, which just means listen closely. Hearken diligently to me, eat what is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness, the profuseness of spiritual joy. I feel like you could just meditate on that verse like for a whole day and probably get very drunk in the spirit. Let your soul delight itself in fatness. I love that idea of God just being so abundant, so fat, that there's just this invitation to literally delight ourselves in all the goodness that he has. And you know, I was talking about Barney, my son, earlier, and probably not many of you have seen him in the flesh for a while, but I just let you know that currently he's in that like really like fat, chubby toddler stage, and probably at least 3 will like get him and like squidge him, and Josh will be like, whoa, you're so delightfully fat, Barney. And I don't know if you've ever been around like a baby or a toddler that's just in that real chubby stage, but there's something in me that actually just wants to like eat him a little bit. It's just, he's so delightfully fat. And the cool thing is that we're not just talking about like the fatness of a baby here, but we're talking about the abundance of God, the abundance of his of stuff, but literally just who he is, just being so abundant that we can't even handle it. Basically, he is way better than I think we realize most of the time. God is way better than you think he is. He is more loving, more faithful, more merciful, more good than we can understand. And he has more joy, more peace, more strength, more grace, more freedom than any of us can ever handle. It reminds me of this quote from C.S. Lewis, and I think Josh used it the other day, but it's just so good. I think it bears repeating. It's from his book, The Weight of Glory. And if you've never read any C.S. Lewis, then you should, because he's amazing. But this quote, he says, if we consider the unblushing promises of reward promised in the Gospels, it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased. Infinite joy is offered us. And I just think when I read that quote, that, you know, I don't think we can ever desire more than God has to give. You could never desire so much of God that he would be like, oh, sorry, I've run out, nothing more to give you, I'm afraid. You could never desire more than God has to give. And I don't know, you know, what it is for all of us, because we're all on different journeys, whether it's peace that you are desperately longing for, whether you really need some joy, whether it's purpose or grace, you just need the grace of God to feel like his grace is covering you, whether you're desperate for freedom in a certain area of your life. But I really believe that you can't desire more of any of those things than God can give you. Remember, his paths drop with fatness. He's got so much. I was thinking, you know, to use the feasting imagery, God is like an all-you-can-eat buffet. My dad loves a good all-you-can-eat. The capacity for my dad in an all-you-can-eat buffet is quite astonishing. But God's like that. He's like an all-you-can-eat buffet. It's like your grandma who pretends she can't hear you saying that you're full and just keeps filling up your plate anyway, second, third, fourth helpings, more than you could ever get to the end of. And the thing is about this kind of abundance from God and the kind of feasting that we're invited to, especially in these verses in Isaiah, is that it's not just extravagant, but this stuff actually satisfies. It's not just quantity, it's like quality as well. This stuff satisfies. That Passion translation of those verses in Isaiah that we, this sort of opening of an invitation. It's like this invitation to go on a journey to somewhere, and the question it starts with, are you thirsty for more? Is there a thirst in you for something more? And it kind of taps into this idea of desire, wanting more than that which we already have, which I think it's probably fair to say as human beings is a feeling we can probably area of our lives. I read a brilliant book recently, which I would highly recommend, called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, written by a pastor from Portland called John Comer. Such a good book. And in it, in one of the chapters, he kind of explored the nature of desire, which was really fascinating. And he was kind of suggesting that when we as finite humans, and what that means is just simply that we have all sorts of limits on us. We're finite, we have limits. When we as finite beings live with desire, which by its nature is infinite, it has no limits. In some senses, desire can never be satisfied, because when we get that thing we wanted, it kind of leads to more desire. So when we as finite humans live with infinite desire, we can, if we deal with it in a healthy way, just end up living with a constant state of restlessness, kind of deep on the inside, a constant sense of dissatisfaction in kind of the deepest levels of who we are. And when you look at the world, and you look at our culture, and you look at humanity, you can really see this played out. We chase after all sorts of things to try and something about this kind of unsatisfied desire that we feel right at the deepest levels of who we are. But the fact is that ultimately there's absolutely nothing on this earth that can deal with that desire, that can actually satisfy us in the way that we need. And that's exactly what these verses from Isaiah are confronting us with, basically. He says, why spend your hard-earned money? Why do you work so hard for something that ultimately will not, scratch where you're itching? It will not satisfy you. It's, he's kind of saying it's madness. This is madness. Can you not see that these things that you're chasing after with all of your energy, not just your money, but actually the essence of who you are, your very selves, it's madness to live this way. It reminds me of the very first time you had a McDonald's. Anyone? Just me? My mum and dad were quite into healthy eating when I was growing up, and so the very first time I had a McDonald's was 1992 in France, of all places, and it was quite the event. I remember we were quite like, "Ooh, first McDonald's, check us out, this is fancy," and we went and had this McDonald's, and about 2 or 3 hours later, we were on the beach having bags of chips. I don't know why we decided to have chips again after just having had chips, but basically we just weren't full. Our expectation of McDonald's did not turn out very well. It didn't live up to the expectation, because we ate this whole McDonald's meal, and then 3 hours later we were like, we're actually quite hungry. Should we go and get some more chips? And so we ended up having like this whole other meal just a few hours after. And why are you spending your money on stuff which actually doesn't fill you up? Because all that's going to happen is you're going to get trapped in this cycle of just needing to keep on, because you'll eat, and then you won't be full, and then you'll have to go get more, and you're just trapped in this cycle. And ultimately you're never going to know satisfaction in the deepest levels of who you are. That restlessness that you feel is never gonna know any peace. The good thing is that there is, says in these verses in Isaiah, no, instead of doing that, instead of chasing after the wind, listen to me and eat the most satisfying meal of your entire life. And the truth is that God is the only one able to satisfy every single one of our desires, even the ones that we're not even fully aware of, because he made us and he knows what's going on in the deepest bits of who we are. Saint Augustine said this. It's become a really famous quote, and it's amazing. He said this: you God have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. God, you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. And Dallas Willard more recently said, desire is infinite, part to need God and made to run on God. We can be satisfied only by the one who is infinite. We can be satisfied only by the one who is infinite. And in my words, God is the only one fat enough. He's the only one with enough stuff, enough goodness, enough peace, enough joy, enough freedom to fully fill up all the parts of us that need filling up. The only one to actually make us feel, to allow us to walk through life with a contentment, a kind of a grounded contentment that means we can just be present in the moment and not feel like we've got to be chasing the next thing, got to chase the next experience, got to be doing something else, got to be eating this, traveling to this place, doing this thing. You know, none of those things are bad. Satisfied first and foremost with him. And you know, that this really is something that God has been, like I said, teaching me really personally about. The last few months have been probably quite life-changing, and I don't use that phrase lightly for me. God's been, I guess I had the opportunity with Josh being home for the whole, but for us, that's kind of the gift that we had. Kind of used that time to quite ruthlessly pursue God and to just really find some rhythms again of spending time alone with Jesus. And it's funny because that was something, you know, pre-children, that was an absolute integral, the thing that gave me so much life. And then I think when I became a mum, lots of people said to me, oh, you know, you won't really have time alone with Jesus, you'll have to snatch it when you can, on lots of levels. That is totally true. Like, for those of you who are parents, you know, when you have small humans around, you just don't have the freedom of time that you have before. But actually, it's kind of a few months ago, really, I kind of just woke up and thought, do you know what? Like, I'm fully alive at the moment. And I think partly it's because I'm just not satisfying myself in God. I'm not taking, you know, the amount of time, and I would snatch time, but I didn't think I was able to carve out that consistent time to really do what we're talking about, to feast on God, to satisfy myself first and foremost in him. And I just suddenly realized, you know what, I just need to get up really early before the kids are up, and I probably won't die. I might be tired, but I don't think I'll die, and I just need to do that. And so that's what I did. And actually, me and Josh both did that together. I mean, don't even ask what time Josh has been getting up. He's like a whole nother level of hardcore, but I got up as early as I thought I could manage it. And it has been absolutely transforming for me. I feel like I have remembered who I am again. I think kind of looking back at the last 5 years, probably since I've done this whole stay-at-home mum thing, I've realised that actually I've been a little bit sad, being really honest, and I've had kind of a low-level anxiety probably going on quite a lot of the time, and a sort of a vague sense of a bit of lack of purpose, being really honest. And, you know, not in a really chronic way, probably not that many people would me. But looking back, I can kind of see that that's actually where I've been at. And it's so cool because, you know, Josh, our cafe is open again now. Josh is back at the cafe. Lockdown is, you know, not really affecting my life anymore. I'm back on my own with the kids every day, just doing my thing, you know, very mundane, hard, long hours, very little headspace. But I feel completely different. Purpose in my days that is absolutely nothing to do with my circumstances, and the only thing I can put it down to is that I've rediscovered a rhythm of just ruthlessly pursuing time alone with God and satisfying myself in him. And it's a little bit like I've often heard people say when they go on these sort of package holidays, say, yeah, it's great, we're going to be at this hotel and we get breakfast and we get dinner, so we don't even really need to eat lunch. But that's a little bit how it feels currently, sort of spiritually. Kind of eating spiritually in the morning, and it lasts me. My whole days are different. So I just wanted to share that with you and just be really honest about where I've been at and where God has brought me, and kind of bring a bit of a challenge, really. The amazing thing, and I am going to wrap up soon. I've no idea how long I've been going. I hope you're still with me. The amazing thing of himself is always on offer, no matter what the circumstances of our life. That's what the verse says, without cost. Without cost. It's completely free for you and me anyway. Jesus paid the cost. There was a cost, but Jesus paid it. So for you and me, this feast is completely free. And our ability to satisfy ourselves in the natural fluctuates from season to season. Some days we might be able to eat roast beef and a night, and in the natural, that's how things go. But in the spiritual, this banquet table of God is always available, always available. And in Philippians 4, when Paul says he's learned to be content in every circumstance, I think this is what he was on about. Whether in need or in plenty, he'd learned how to feast on the fatness of God. And so it didn't really matter what his external circumstances, he was satisfied because of God's abundance. Love about this truth, and then I'll kind of get to a bit of I've got some challenging questions, and then a bit of a something for us to try this week. But just the last thing that I love about this truth is that it really binds us together as a community and as a family. Doug used this imagery last week when he was speaking about sitting at a kitchen table with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and it was kind of a picture. Week, it's like an invitation to sit round a banqueting table for a family feast where God himself is on the menu. And I read this in another little devotional thing. It said, this is a snapshot into God's heart, a heart that longs to sound the dinner bell and set the table where all are invited. And I just love that. Nobody is excluded from this feast. This is the thing that, but also just as human beings, God invites every single thing that he's created to this feast to come and share in his abundance. So it's a communal invitation, but it is an individual invitation as well. Nobody else in the natural can eat for you. There would be no use in me saying, oh, well, Josh had a big breakfast this morning, so actually I'm good. What it needs to in his body. But if I want my body to be strong, I've actually got to eat myself in the natural. And it's like that in the spiritual. Nobody else can eat for you spiritually. If you don't feed yourself on good stuff, then you'll end up really spiritually malnourished. So there's like a communal invitation, and we get to sit together at this table as family, which as well. And that's where my kind of challenging questions come in that I wanted to kind of wrap up with. And we're going to share communion together in a minute as a way of just responding and actually kind of use it as a bit of a feast together. But I just wanted to ask you these questions to finish. You don't have to answer them out loud, just have a think about them in your own heart and be really honest. My first question was, are you enjoying God currently? God? Is there an enjoyment of God in your day-to-day life? And think of how you felt the last time you sat down to a really, really good meal. I mean, that sort of enjoyment. Are you enjoying God? Are you eating what is good spiritually? I mean, if you think about the things that you consume during your days and weeks, the things that you fill your time with, all the aspects of your life, are you eating good things? Are you nourishing yourself well? Do you find God satisfying? Is there an experience of God in your day to day where you could say, God is really satisfying to me? He satisfies me. And finally, just like the promise was, your total being will flourish. Or do you feel like your being is flourishing? Could you say that you're in a place of flourishing? And I don't mean any condemnation at this point. It's just a gentle sort of encouragement. Obviously, we're all on a journey, and at any one point on our journeys with Jesus, it probably feels like actually there's some things that are really alive, and there's other bits that feel a bit tricky on a journey. But generally there should be a trend. If we're pursuing Jesus and active discipleship, there should be an ongoing trend where we are continually flourishing more and more, that there is life in our beings. So are you flourishing? Do you feel like you're flourishing? So yeah, I might post those questions on our LoveBristol group after this, but maybe share them around if you manage. To leave you with one little challenge that I thought maybe we could all try this week, and then we'll move on to communion. I talked about getting up early and just ruthlessly carving out time to be alone with God. And I'm not saying that that is the be all and end all of a life of faith. I don't think it is, but I think it's really key. I really do just think it's actually crucial that if we want to be growing in our faith and pursuing Jesus, that we just have to find time to spend alone with God. And so I wanted to set you a bit of a challenge this week. If you are at all able, and there might be some of us where we just can't, our circumstances won't allow, and that's fine. Maybe you could get creative and find a different way of doing this. But if you are able, my challenge this week is to set your alarm clock every morning between now and next Sunday, half an hour earlier, and get up, get some coffee or whatever your drink of choice is, and with God. And if that's something completely new to you, then that could look like you could go out for a walk, you could put some worship music on, get your Bible, read a psalm, read a chapter of a gospel. You could even just take some of the verses that we've talked about today and just sit and meditate on them. But see if you can get up just that little bit earlier. And if you're already doing this, then great. Maybe you might want to get up even earlier, I don't know. But if you're not, if that's not something that's a regular rhythm, I'm going to set this challenge that we would all try and do this as a church this week. And then next week, next Sunday, it'd be great just to have some feedback on that and just find out, if God did stuff and what God was doing through that time with him. So that's just the challenge I wanted to leave you with. God is absolutely more abundant, fatter in fact, than we can even handle in him. And I think that has the power to just revolutionize the way that we live our days and the way that we get used in his kingdom. So yeah, I'm going to pass back over to Greg, and I think we're going to share communion to really use that as a bit of a response to this. So back to you, Greg.